Let's go on to some more serious matters now. I remember reporting on this story 20 years ago as a pretty novice reporter, and it was just horrific at the time of year especially that this had taken place. And I'm, of course, talking about the Boxing Day tsunami. 30-metre waves, you'll remember, that killed more than 220,000 people across 15 countries. I can't believe it's been 20 years. And of course, it has now gone down as the deadliest tsunami in history. Of course, it was the Boxing Day tsunami, but really it was about 20 years ago to the day, a day on really, that the gravity and the real destruction that we saw was acknowledged. And actually it was many days later. I remember at the time, every day it was like this awful running total that kept going up and up and up and up of the number of people who had lost their lives. The Indian Ocean was where, of course, this all started. 26th of December 2004, it was a 9.1 magnitude earthquake which struck Indonesia's Sumatra island. That was what triggered these huge waves that slammed into coastal communities. Well, let's now talk to Annie Naqvi. She is a tsunami survivor and coach who joins us live here on Talk. Firstly, Annie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this. So firstly, how are you today? I mean, if you were involved and you're a survivor of it, do these momentous anniversaries, the big ones, 5, 10, 20 years, are they more difficult? Is it the same every year?
I would say, obviously, because it is the 20-year anniversary, there has been a lot more focus on it. So it has been more difficult this year, remembering back, but you always have that same feeling around this time of year when you acknowledge that you were one of the very lucky survivors when so many others did die.
And so more people talking about it. Sometimes it's these sorts of things when people are talking about it and acknowledging it and there's more publicity around it. That can be healing, but that's something you actually find a bit more difficult.
I don't know. I mean, it can be healing, but obviously whenever you're going over an old trauma, it can, the brain doesn't really recognize what's the difference between a real trauma and an imagined trauma. So it can easily take you back to those times if you're kind of going over it again and again. So it's kind of like, it can be very healing, but it can also be upsetting for many to kind of revisit those kind of memories that they have.
Let's go back to the day when this happened, so Boxing Day 2004. So where were you and what happened to you on the day?
So I was holidaying on the east coast of Sri Lanka in my friend's guest house, Galaxy Lounge in Aragon Bay. And I was asleep in my hut, which was just off the beach, just a few meters from the beach, when the tsunami struck. So the first thing that I became aware of was the door to my hut flinging open and water flooding in at first. And then in the split second it was flooding in, it started to come in from all sides of the doors and the windows. And I was submerged underneath the water within milliseconds, drowning and fighting for my life. And it was pitch black, and the water was pitch black and inky, so there was no light in the room. And of course, you've just gone from being fast asleep to waking up to having the entire Indian Ocean in your room, and you're rolling around like a grain of rice in a washing machine with no idea as to what's happened at all.
I absolutely can't get my head around that. I can't believe it, because the view is, naively, that everyone saw that it was coming or was on the beach or could see that something was happening and was either running away to get from higher ground. I suppose it's because we've seen so much footage of people who have, or footage taken. It was one of the first, I think, really big disasters where we got a lot of video footage of it happening. And it's just... So the idea that you were asleep, fast asleep, on your own, presumably?
Yes, I was on my
So
own
fast asleep in a beach hut, which is something I've been in many, many times, many of us will have, and then suddenly being woken by water flooding in on top of you. That would have been petrifying.
Absolutely. Of course, I was petrified. I was completely terrified. I didn't know what had happened. It was even the days before we were aware of what tsunamis were. I'd gone from being, just tucked up cozily in my bed to, being underwater fighting for my life within literally seconds. And that is when you don't know what's happened and you're literally dying, you're drowning in that water. There is nothing else. You're just you're completely panicking. You're in survival mode. You're terrified. I mean, I honestly didn't think I was going to make it out of that hut that day. And I had this overriding feeling of, I can't believe I'm going to die and I haven't even truly lived. And that was the kind of the thought and the memory that kept me going for many years afterwards as well, actually.
So, and we're going to get to how you've turned this into a positive. And because I really think we should talk about that. But so you're scrambling around, all this water's coming into the beach hut. It's pitch black, and you are. It's a complete nightmare for you. Is the hut itself moving, or is it the hut staying still and the water's just coming in?
So at first, the hut was staying still. Everything that's in the hut becomes a missile, obviously, because it's swirling around in this washing machine with you. So all the furniture's bashing into you, all of the, all the fixtures and fittings in the room, they are, coming undone, and they are also missiles. So all my clothes were ripped off. The only thing, because the force of the tsunami was so strong, the only thing I had on was my T-shirt, which was also trying to come off me, and so it was blinding me because it was over the top of my head. So you're completely disorientated. My eardrums burst from the pressure of the water. I couldn't see anything. I'm drinking this dirty, salty water, and
what did you think was happening, or could you not compute what was going on?
The only thing that was going through my mind was maybe this was a freak full moon wave, because it was on the full moon, you see. And I just thought maybe there has been a freak full moon wave that's breached my hut.
What time of day was it?
So it was around 8:30, between 8 and 9 in the morning.
Okay, so you didn't know it was morning because obviously it was pitch black, but so you were presuming it was this freak wave from the night. You were just, being swirling around, your eardrums had burst. What next?
So there was light, but the water was black, so it literally took up all the light in the room. So when the door first flung open, there was light, but then when the wave came in, there was no light anymore. It was pitch black. So if it had have been a few hours earlier, nobody would have survived. I can guarantee you that, because it was the light that saved us in the end. But eventually the hut did disintegrate because the tsunami was just destroying everything in its path. And, everything was destroyed. The hut began to fall apart. And as the hut fell apart, that's when I started to get washed inland with the tsunami, and I wasn't outside anymore. And that's when I had the light as well. So I was then able to realize that I was on the bottom of the seafloor. So I would try to reorient myself so that my head was kind of facing towards a light, so I could actually get some air.
And so then you get to the surface after having swum up to the surface following the light. And what happens then? Because presumably you're still in the water, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point, now I'm kind of thinking, okay, so I need to grab hold of something. But you're going at such fast speeds, and there's no real swimming involved. I saw my friend standing on something as I was being washed inland, and I could see bodies in the water next to me. And so that was the first realization that I had, that whatever this thing was, it was deadly, and that it was killing people. And I knew that if I didn't stop before I got into the jungle, because we were very close to coming into the jungle, that I could potentially get knocked unconscious, and then I too would drown like these other poor people. I got really, I did get trapped underneath a falling building to begin with and got trapped face first. And that was the second time that I thought I was going to die. Then I had a palm reading that came to me that I'd had years before, telling me I would have a near-death experience, but I would survive it. And at that very moment, the debris that was holding me down moved out of the way. But eventually, I was thrown into the path of a palm tree. It totally winded me, but it also saved my life because I held onto that palm tree for dear life and, waited until the water was still going over my head at this point, though. So the water's still going over my head, but there's enough of a lull every now and again for me to get a breath of air. And then after, I don't know how many minutes it was, but the water eventually started to suck back out to sea again. And as it sucked back out to sea, it sort of went to about chest height. And that's when I was able to sort of get off the palm tree and make my way back to my friends.
And obviously then the initial danger was over, and presumably you were able to sort of gather yourself and get back home.
Well, no, actually, it wasn't as simple as that for us. So initially, the danger seemed over, but we started walking back towards the beach. Then we nearly got caught in a second tsunami. We were very lucky that we had some local people that, as we sort of did an about turn and ran backwards, we then were directed to a kind of small mound that then saved us from that second tsunami. But after that, we made our way to higher ground. Unfortunately, in our area, we had seven really big tsunamis, and the fifth tsunami took out the bridge that connected us to the mainland. So now we were kind of surrounded by a crocodile-filled lagoon, a leopard-filled jungle, and a killer tsunami, with no way in or out, with no potable water, no food supplies. So we actually didn't get rescued till the following day. And that was as a result of me remembering the number of the BBC from when I'd worked there back in the 90s and calling them to get the British High Commission to come and rescue us the following day.
Wow. I mean, so it was really a combination of your quick thinking, luck, some sort of divine intervention regarding that palm reading and everything else that means you're talking to me today. You've done a lot since, haven't you, to try and make this, if in any way it can be, an experience that you've tried to turn into something positive, right?
Absolutely, yes. So obviously, having survived that tsunami, I did experience a lot of survivor guilt, which is quite normal when so many people die and you don't. And this feeling that I had when I was in the hut, I had this voice that came to me and said, remember this moment, you do not want to die. And because I'd suffered from, depression and anxiety and all those sort of things, as many people do when I was in my younger years. And the tsunami was really the catalyst for me searching and finding my purpose. I kind of went into doing a lot of work around, really figuring out how the trauma brain kind of works and when you go into survival mode and how you kind of make your way out of that survival mode so that you can kind of change your neuroplasticity, essentially, rewire your brain and the way it works. And so that you can be sort of mentally fit and resilient when, when challenging things are happening to us, because we all have challenges that happen to us. So I did a lot of work around that. I did a lot of qualifications and everything. I spent quite a number of years on studying and trying to heal myself, not just from the tsunami, but from later health diagnoses as well. And, I was able to then turn that challenge into an opportunity for growth.
So do you coach people now who
I do.
Then, I don't know, in what way do you coach people?
So I coach people, I usually work with executives, but because that's the type of work that I was doing before. But I coach people on helping them to move from, You know, they're kind of our normal sort of survival brain, which is the kind of like where the negativity bias exists, where most people are operating in default through their survival brain without really knowing it. And I help them to rewire their brain so that they can then operate in their thriving part of their brain, their wizard brain, instead of the lizard brain. And, you know, so that people can experience less stress, less overwhelm and burnout, and they experience more peace and joy and balance.
And better mental health.
It's mental fitness, I would say.
Because I'm absolutely, just to finish on, I mean, I talk a lot about this on the show, and I don't always say this in wanting to be unkind, but I'm fascinated by the fact that when years ago, when our older generation had horrific things they went through, like wars and awful adversity and having no money and all this terrible stuff that we used to have as a society and during the world, all that turmoil, that actually they appeared to have, although they were suffering from the terrible trauma at the time, they appeared to have better mental health outcomes than we have today. There's a lot of research that says that as brilliant as it is that we have had years of peace and no adversity and all of those things in our lives, what that means is that there's a lot of catastrophizing goes on when things do go wrong in people's lives. And that's why we see a lot of younger people who have mental health problems, because they don't have a benchmark really of real external adversity that they faced in their lives. And I suppose I just find it really fascinating that terrible adversity you went through, that near-death experience, was the catalyst for you seeing something far bigger than yourself and realising that you had a chance to rewire your brain.
Well, absolutely. Look, it's true. Resilience does breed, it does breed mental fitness. You know, when you have a lot of challenge going on in your life, there's sink or swim, right? You have to kind of either overcome it or it just engulfs you and you sink under those waves. So I do believe, you know, I've had three near-death experiences, multiple cancer diagnosis, stage 4 diagnosis, and all of it has helped me to be the resilient person that I am today. So much so that I've written a book about my experience, but it's also...
What's that called?
It's called Tsunami, the wave that saved my life and can save yours, because it's not just an account of the tsunami, but it's also how I overcame all of those challenges so that and what I did and the lessons that I learned so that other people can apply them to their own.
Oh, move it across a bit nearer to... Oh, there we go. We put you full screen. I love that. And I love the story of how something so terrible has become something that saved you and can potentially save others. Really interesting to talk to you, and really grateful that you've taken the time to tell us your story today, your staggering story today. That's Anna Naqvi, tsunami survivor, author and coach.